Hey guys, so today's story has got to be the most satisfying malicious compliance story I've ever read. The HWA thinks they've completely screwed OP, but they missed one crucial detail, and now he owns them. HWA wants me to join, so I do. Just not how they expected. Post by also not the mama. So this story is about a property that I own, but rent out. This might sound strange, but I don't think I could afford to live there these days. It's become somewhat exclusive. Background. A million years ago, my property was part of a large farm. I bought it about 30 years ago, long after the farm was broken up, but before there was any development near it. The piece of land I got was near the back entrance that joined up to a dirt road that ran past. The more expensive plots were near the tarred road in the front. I'd originally bought the large chunk of land intending to do some farming, but that never happened. About 20 years ago, some of the owners got organised and had the area designated as a municipal suburb. They agreed to put in tarred roads, water and electricity if a certain percentage of the properties were developed. A construction company linked to this group went around contacting the owners who had land but no buildings, offering to build houses for us at a very reasonable price, contingent on them getting a certain number of people signing up. While this was happening, one of the group approached me and offered to buy half my property. I agreed, and the money I got from the sale, which was about 4 times what I paid for the entire chunk of land 10 years prior, combined with a small loan from the bank, gave me what I needed to pay for a house to be built. And it was a fairly large and nice house too. I stayed in the house for a few years, and my mum moved in with me. I decided to subdivide the property again and build her a house right next to mine. But unfortunately, an undiagnosed tumour took her before the house could even be started. Soon after she died, we moved out of the house and started renting it out. About a few weeks before we moved out, the neighbour I'd sold my land to started talking about starting a HOA. I wasn't interested and left soon after. 2 years later, my neighbour contacted me. There were 2 roads into the area these days. The original tarred road that was near where the farmhouse had been, coming off a fairly busy main road, and my dirt road back entrance, which was now a tarred entrance from a wide but not very busy road. The HOA was trying to get the old farm road blocked off to improve security and decrease through traffic, and want the road next to my property to be the main and only entrance to the HOA community, and they were pressuring me to join. I said no and was adamant, and eventually they accepted that. But they told me they wanted to have a sign near the road welcoming people to the neighbourhood, and the only practical place to put it was on the edge of my property. They also wanted to have a little guard hut and have a security guard permanently monitoring who went in and out, and they wanted to build his shed on my property. We came to an agreement whereby they would mow my lawn and pay the equivalent of about $35 US per month in exchange for the land they needed. I was very happy with this arrangement since the property was fairly large and didn't really cost them anything since they already had a full-time gardening service servicing the HOA. This all happened over a decade ago. They eventually got the other main road blocked off, and the HOA is paying for a rent-a-cop to be permanently stationed close to my property, as well as mowing my lawn and pay me enough money for takeaways for the family each month. I'm occasionally contacted by members of the HOA trying to get me to sign up, but I'm really not interested. My property has been rented to the same tenant all these years, and everything there is going well for me. This was until about 3 years ago, when someone scared my tenant's young daughter by making strange noises and shooting a gun close to a bedroom window 3 or 4 times over about a month. This scared my tenant, and I guess it scared the HOA too, because they and my tenant contacted me with a proposal. I joined the HOA, and they give me exclusions from the HOA rules, including exclusions from paying the monthly fees. And in addition, they'll build a wall around the entire HOA neighbourhood, including an electric fence and security cameras. They told me they'd wanted to do this for a while, but were unwilling to build a wall on a property that was not in the HOA. I couldn't see the downside, so I agreed. The dishonest dealings. It took a little over a year to build the wall and get everything completed, which was quite fast. And then a month to the day after everything was done, my tenant got a HOA warning about his dogs barking. He told the HOA that while the property was in the HOA, it was exempt from the rules. The HOA told him that they'd cancelled the exemptions and that he had 30 days to comply. He contacted me and I opened some of the mail I'd gotten from the HOA. I'd ignored it since I was supposed to be exempt from the rules and fees. Man, did I get a surprise. They'd retroactively cancelled the exemptions and were claiming 1. That I pay late fees going back over a year. 2. That the easement agreement had been cancelled and that they were retroactively cancelling it a year back because the HOA contract allowed them to use small unused portions of HOA members' land for the common good for free. 3. That I refund the money they'd paid for the easement over that period. 4. That I owed them money for the garden service of them mowing my large lawn. And 5. That I would be fined for each infraction my tenant failed to remedy. This started an expensive process involving lawyers in the court system that ended with the judge telling me that what the HOA had done was mostly legal. They had the right to revoke exemptions, but they had to give me 30 days notice. As I was walking to my car, my old neighbour, the one who'd bought half my land so many years ago, told me that I was stupid to have refused to join the HOA when it started, as I could have been a founding member, whatever that means, and that next time, I should be sure to understand the documents I sign before signing them. The malicious compliance. My neighbour was right, I should have read the contract better. So when I got home, I grabbed the HOA contract I'd signed, as well as all the other documentation they provided me with, and started reading. I was determined to break every rule I could find a loophole to break. Well, I didn't get past the first page. While the street address of the property is used to identify it for all practical purposes, in the city records, it has a unique property number that has to be used on all legal documents. Remember how when my mum moved in, I'd subdivide the remaining property but hadn't yet started building on it yet? Well, when I gave the HOA the easement all those years ago, it'd been on the property that had sliced off for my mum, and when the HOA set up the contract, they'd simply used the property number from the easement. The next afternoon, my neighbour delivered and had me sign for 2 documents, one telling me that my exemptions would expire in 30 days, and one letting me know that the easement would no longer be required after 30 days. I think he was being a bit malicious here because I lived about an hour away from the property and he drove out himself. The revenge. Exactly 30 days to the hour after the HOA had given me the 30 days notice, I knocked on my old neighbour's door. Did I mention he was president of the HOA? And had him sign for 2 documents. The first was that I planned to build a house on my HOA property, which confused him. And the second was a notice that they had 30 days to remove from the property the guard shed, the parts of the electric boom that were on my property, as well as the sign. He tried to engage me, but I ignored him, climbed into my car, and drove off. Early the next morning, I got a call from the HOA lawyer who explained to me that their junk would be staying on my property since it was on an unused part of my land. I explained that I was building a house there and that the land would not be unused anymore. I could practically hear the smirk as he told me that building a second house to be spiteful would not be accepted by the courts. I sure hope he could hear the smirk in my voice when I told him that the property in question did not have a house, and was, in fact, barely large enough for a house to be built, and would not be large enough for any extra buildings. I then told him to go look up the property in question and call me back. I had sliced off just enough to be legal, which was only enough to build a small house. You know what? I'd have gone even further and not clued them into the reason I could build a second house. Let them go to court with their pants down, expecting you to be laughed out for trying to build 2 houses on the same property, only for them to look like complete idiots for not having the correct address. Hey, if they're gonna be malicious, why not let them waste even more time and money? It took them just under 5 days to get back to me. Their lawyer told me that the terms of the easement meant that I couldn't cancel without their permission. So I emailed him a photo of the document they sent me, cancelling the easement. Oh, that's hilarious. They cancelled the easement, thinking they'd get it for free. Whoops! That afternoon, my neighbour invited me to lunch, his treat, to discuss the problem. So now he wants to be cordial. I said, no thanks. He extended the offer again 2 days later, and I again said, no thanks. Others from the HOA reached out to me too, trying to talk. Some sounded aggressive, some sounded sympathetic. I said no thanks to each of them. Eventually the lawyer called and asked if we could come to some sort of arrangement. I asked what he had in mind, and he told me that he was prepared to discuss some exclusions in exchange for access to my property. I said no thanks, and please don't call me again. Yeah, like you're gonna trust their contracts again. About 9 days before the 30 days were up, I got a call from a different lawyer. He said he wanted to negotiate a surrender. His words, not mine. I agreed to meet him at his office the next day. I already had my documents drawn up, and the meeting was as simple as me giving him the documents and him reading them over. My new easement offer included everything offered by the original, but with a slight few changes. I changed the line, mow the lawn, to get the property to HOA standards and keep it there, since it was now in the HOA. It would also cost them about $500 a month instead of $35, and this amount would increase with inflation, unlike before. When cancelled, for whatever reason, the HOA would have to pay me a cancellation fee of around $7,500. The contract would also automatically terminate 30 days after any of the following occurred. 1. Any disciplinary action was taken against me, my tenant, or the property. 2. Any complaints were levied by the HOA against the property. And 3. Any legal action was taken against the property by anyone in the HOA. I also included that this new lawyer would mediate any disputes between us at the HOA's expense, and that the HOA would pay all my legal fees if any legal action was taken against me. As I'm sure you've noticed, I deliberately left some insane things in there, so that I could appear to concede some points and be negotiated down when the HOA got indignant about the points I actually cared about. The lawyer didn't look too happy. He said that my proposal sounded unfair, but that he'd have the HOA president look at it. I reminded him that in 8 days, I'd be sending a group of men armed with sledgehammers and anger management issues loose on whatever of theirs was still my property. That evening, I got an irate call from the HOA president. He told me he was never going to sign the new contract. I said, okay. He then told me that I was charging too much per month, and that it should be the same rate as the previous contract. I pointed out that when I'd signed the previous contract, the area was under development, and there was at least one other road leading in and out, but now there was only mine. And besides, mine was now developed with everything they needed. He told me I was forcing them to sign a document they didn't want to sign. I told him he was free to not sign it. He whined about everything he could think of, and then eventually told me I'd be hearing from his lawyer. The next morning, the new lawyer called to ask if I'd be willing to come to their office to sign the new contract. I agreed. When I got there that afternoon, I learned that he was not in fact a lawyer, but a paralegal. He handed me the contract and asked me to sign it. He laughed when I told him I'd have to read it through first to make sure that nothing was changed, and mumbled something like, "I'm sure you would." I read the contract. Nothing had been changed. Not a single thing. And the HOA president had signed it, with the lawyer signing as witness. I looked at him and said, "Why did he sign this? It was stupid to sign this." And the paralegal looked at me and said, I started telling him that signing it would be a bad decision, but he told me I wasn't being paid to think or give legal advice, and to shut up. So I shut up. I said, "Do you understand what he's signed here?" He looks at me and nods. He said, "I asked him if we should have another lawyer look at it first, but he told me that we'd already billed him enough for this, and that he'd sign it and sue me after the easement was safe." Of all times to get stingy with the lawyers. This happened about a year and a half ago. It took 6 months for the HOA to find out how really screwed they were. They wanted to sue me, but their lawyers explained to them that there was no way to win. Even if the court sided with them, all they would get is the easement contract voided, and they didn't think the court would even side with them. The lawyers were adamant about one thing though. The HOA could not live with the "HOA pays my legal fees if legal action is taken against me," since it didn't limit the people taking legal action against me to the HOA. As this is worded, the HOA would be forced to pay my legal fees if anyone took legal action against me. They argued that the courts would probably not enforce that, since the context of the agreement was to do with the HOA. And I told them that I was prepared to find out, since the HOA would definitely be the ones taking action against me if they challenged it. I eventually signed an addendum to the contract that said that my neighbour, the HOA president, would personally pay for all my legal fees unless he held no position at the HOA at all, and the HOA would pay all my legal fees if the HOA took legal action against me. He resigned from the HOA at the end of that meeting. I politely told him, in front of everyone, that he shouldn't sign documents unless he understands what he's signing. He didn't look pleased. It came out during mediation that without the ability to control access to the HOA neighbourhood through the security boom on my property, the HOA would be in breach of their own articles and would be forced to dissolve. I also learned that all the security cameras were wired to the guardhouse, so basically it was my way or the end of the HOA. The first mediation was really quite funny. The paralegal looked a little glum as we assembled, and he called everyone to order. I suspected that he'd been told to work against me, so I took the initiative. I reminded everyone there that while I had agreed to let the paralegal mediate, I had agreed to no arbitration at all. If I didn't feel like the proceedings were fair, I'd leave and they could go ahead and sue me. The paralegal brightened up after that, and things actually went quite well. I'm writing this after getting home from the latest mediation. I'd built a paddling pool for the neighbourhood dogs, as in, I'd made it myself. I dug a hole, packed it with stone, and added some concrete to finish. It was my first attempt, and if I say so myself, it looked, well, terrible. The HOA called for a mediation meeting, which is what they do now instead of taking official action, and I've declined some of their mediation requests in the past. In this meeting, they told me, as nicely as they could, that the paddling pool was an eyesore right at the entrance of the HOA. I asked them to create a list of what needed to be fixed and how it needed to be fixed, and to give it to me at the next meeting. The list was extensive. Basically, it required the pool to be rebuilt from scratch. I asked them if there was any way to reduce the cost required to get it up to HOA standards, and they assured me there was not. So I thanked them, pulled out a copy of the agreement where they had agreed to get the property to HOA standards, which I had highlighted, and handed it to them with the list. I told them that the HOA usually preferred if these things were dealt with within 30 days. They started arguing until the mediator reminded them that they could not force me to comply without causing the easement to end. They said they'd get it done. I also learned a lot about my old neighbour today. I found out that he sold his property about 3 months back and is apparently leaving the country for Australia. Oh no, we don't want him here. Yes, I'm speaking on behalf of all Australians. I found out that the HOA had successfully sued him for a ton of money, which they'd lost due to his mismanagement as part of his vendetta against me. I also learned that he had a vendetta against me. I have no idea what I did to upset him. I don't think I'll screw with the HOA anymore. I think I'm already so close to breaking them that the only thing stopping them from cancelling the contract is the massive financial loss if they do. I guess it depends on how they treat me and my tenant going forward. Also, I do like the monthly payments, so I'm motivated to play nice. In the end, my neighbour was right. You really shouldn't sign documents you don't understand. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed hearing these stories, please subscribe, and have a great rest of your day.